In a move that baffled fans and critics alike, Ned Fulmer, once a beloved internet personality and former member of the Try Guys, re-emerged in the most unexpected setting imaginable, an untelevised AEW wrestling event in Florida. Appearing under the moniker Nasty End, he stood shoulder to shoulder with seasoned professional wrestlers, striking a pose that seemed more parody than performance. There were no press releases, no formal build-up, no content creator collabs, just a sudden visual of End clad in wrestling gear standing in the ring like he belonged there. The internet naturally erupted. From Reddit threads to Twitter reactions, the response ranged from stunned silence to outright ridicule. Was this performance art? Was it a redemption arc in disguise? Or was this simply a man grasping for reinvention in the wake of one of the most high-profile internet scandals of recent years? Just months earlier, End had been mired in controversy, his fall from grace becoming the subject of viral discourse after revelations about his extramarital affair upended his carefully curated image as the wife guy. So when fans saw him jumping into the world of wrestling, without warning or explanation, it sparked a cascade of theories. Many believed it was part of a bigger PR plan, others speculated it was a standalone stunt. But one thing was clear, End wasn't retreating quietly. He was diving headfirst into chaos. And while the audience stood confused, his next move would make the picture even more convoluted. Because if the wrestling surprise left fans scratching their heads, his follow-up project would leave them openly questioning his motives. What came next wasn't a new chapter. It was a recycled page from the very book that once made him famous. As confusion lingered over his wrestling cameo, Ned Fulmer quickly followed up with another bold move, launching a podcast titled Rock Bottom. Marketed as a space for growth, vulnerability, and redemption, the project promised to be his most personal yet, an intimate platform where guests could share their lowest points and journeys to healing. But the irony was not lost on the internet. For many, the name Rock Bottom wasn't just a title, it was an unintentional summary of how the public viewed End's career post-scandal. What truly ignited conversation, though, was his choice of a first guest, his wife Ariel. Once seen as the heart of his online persona, Ariel sat down for a raw, unfiltered conversation that shattered any illusion of reconciliation. She made it crystal clear they were no longer romantically involved, and she had not forgiven him. Viewers were stunned not just by her honesty, but by End's decision to publicize such a painful reality so early in the podcast's run. Rather than presenting himself as a reformed man seeking forgiveness, End came across to many as tone-deaf, using his own imploded marriage as a launchpad for content. The backlash was swift. Social media lit up with criticisms, accusing End of weaponizing vulnerability for views. "This ain't it," echoed across comment sections. Critics questioned whether End truly understood accountability, or if he was simply trying to fast-track a comeback without doing the emotional work. The show's premise, hosting people who'd been canceled or hit rock bottom, seemed convenient rather than sincere. Who appointed End the spokesperson for the publicly shamed? Was this an effort to build empathy, or just another attempt to reshape the narrative on his terms? Despite its glossy production and emotional framing, Rock Bottom felt to many like a self-serving mirror disguised as a microphone. But if audiences thought this would be the end of End's public-facing return, they were in for another twist. Because while Rock Bottom may have been the name of his podcast, his next project would be a bold, and some say brazen, attempt to climb back up by walking straight into familiar territory. The very content formula that made him famous, but without the team that once held him up. In a twist that ignited even more criticism, Ned Fulmer released a trailer for a new YouTube series that, according to hundreds of viewers, looked almost indistinguishable from his former gig with the Try Guys. The visuals, the segment structure, even the tone, it all mirrored the very group he was removed from just a year earlier. The show, teased with polished footage and high-production editing, showcased End stepping into various new experiences. Intense physical challenges, awkward romantic setups, culinary adventures, and social experiments. He boldly claimed the show would explore curiosity, empathy, and comedy, all without once saying the word try, a strategic omission that did little to distract viewers from the blatant parallels. While Fulmer avoided direct references to his past affiliation, the setup screamed Try Guys 2 with End as the solo lead. And perhaps most jarring was the use of we in his narration, prompting immediate questions. Who is we? Is this End's attempt to build a second Try team from scratch? Fans weren't buying it. Comments piled in with accusations of unoriginality and tone deafness. For many, the show didn't feel like a fresh start. It felt like a forced reboot of a past he hadn't earned back. Worse, it reignited memories of the scandal he had yet to repair in the public's eyes. Critics argued that if there was ever a blueprint for how not to return after a fall from grace, this might be it. Rather than reinventing himself, End appeared to be mimicking the very formula that brought him both fame and downfall, just without the authenticity or camaraderie that once made it work. If his podcast was received with skepticism, this new series only added fuel to the fire. But as backlash escalated, it was clear that the problem wasn't just the content. It was the audience's growing perception that End was trying to rewrite history, and in doing so, accidentally proving how irreplaceable his old teammates really were. The digital backlash to Ned Fulmer's rebranding efforts has been anything but subtle. From TikTok compilations to snarky tweets and savage Reddit threads, internet users wasted no time voicing their collective disdain, and they did so with razor-sharp sarcasm. One quote in particular began circulating widely across platforms. Ariel Fulmer's pointed question during their podcast episode, "You think you're that?" The rallying cry for online skeptics who felt End's self-importance had finally gone too far. Meme after meme lampooned his new direction, with comments ranging from "he should try being humble" to "Ned Fulmer tries to stay relevant," and the particularly brutal suggestion, "try fidelity next." What was once whispered criticism has now evolved into open ridicule. Fans who once followed his journey now mock the audacity of a man attempting to reclaim internet stardom without acknowledging the full weight of his public downfall. Observers weren't just laughing at his missteps, they were dissecting them. His wrestling appearance, dubbed a humiliation ritual. His new series called Pathetic Cosplay of his own past. The flood of comments across YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter suggested that viewers weren't just uninterested, they were actively rooting for the project to fail. And unlike traditional celebrity scandals that eventually fade, End seemed to have a unique staying power precisely because he refused to let go of the spotlight. Critics argued that his refusal to step back and reflect was the reason his image couldn't heal. Instead of disappearing and rebuilding from the background, he was forcing a second act on an audience that had already written their own ending. And the more content he dropped, the harsher the reactions became. Still, amid the noise, some wondered, what exactly was fueling this comeback? Was it pride, desperation, or something more complicated? Beneath the spectacle of Ned Fulmer's controversial relaunch lies a deeper question, one that cuts to the core of his public identity. Who is he really without the wife guy brand? Throughout his years with the Try Guys, End's entire persona revolved around being a committed husband and father. His devotion to Ariel was more than content. It was a marketing strategy, a personality brand, and a moral anchor that made him relatable to millions. But in the wake of the cheating scandal, that foundation collapsed. And now, with his podcast and new series, End is attempting a narrative pivot that many find both unconvincing and contradictory. During his podcast with Ariel, he expressed discomfort over being boxed into a role: the dependable husband, the family man, the guy who always gushed about his spouse. He claimed that persona no longer fit who he wanted to be. But audiences couldn't help noticing the irony. He didn't seem to hate that box until he was exposed for violating everything it represented. The shift in tone from "look at my perfect marriage" to "I'm just a curious host exploring" many as disingenuous. It's not that public figures can't evolve, it's that End's transformation felt more like a crisis response than genuine growth. And worse, it came across as evasive. He didn't want to be known for his personal life anymore, but that was exactly what made him compelling to audiences in the first place. So when he asked for a clean slate, the internet replied, "You earned our attention through a brand you destroyed, why should we follow you now?" His own words betrayed him. Instead of accountability, he offered ambiguity. Instead of introspection, he pivoted. And now, as he tries to step into a new role, one of a host, a guide, a storyteller, the question remains whether his audience sees anything worth following without the title of husband holding it all together. If one thing is abundantly clear from the trailers and behind-the-scenes footage Ned Fulmer has released, it's that his comeback series isn't a scrappy DIY effort. This is a polished, expensive production. Multiple cameras, cinematic edits, professional sound design, complex shoot locations, and even segments involving planes, comedians, and elaborate set pieces suggest a significant budget, one that likely stretches into the tens of thousands per episode. And that's left many asking, who's bankrolling this? Speculation ranges from Fulmer self-funding the entire venture with whatever wealth he amassed during his Try Guys tenure, to silent investors hedging a risky bet on viral content. But one thing is undeniable, the money behind this project doesn't reflect the public interest in it. In fact, the louder the production gets, the quieter the audience reception becomes. Unlike the organic growth of his former group, this new effort feels like a high-budget gamble made without market research. The comments across his platforms don't suggest momentum, they suggest resistance. And that makes the optics even more awkward. It's not just a man trying again, it's a man pouring resources into a project that the public appears to have already rejected. As one viewer bluntly put it, he's trying to buy back an audience that's already moved on. Others wondered if the flashy production was compensating for a lack of substance or sincerity. Because no matter how good the lighting or how slick the trailer, viewers still want to know, what exactly is the point of all this? And more importantly, who asked for it? While End may believe this series is the first step toward reinvention, the disconnect between its lavish execution and the cold reception raises a darker possibility. That all the money in the world can't repair a reputation if the audience doesn't believe in the story you're trying to tell. At the heart of Ned Fulmer's sudden re-entry into content creation lies a philosophical debate that's split the internet. Is this about redemption or is it about ego? In his own words, Ned has stated that he no longer wants to center his content on himself. He claims to see himself more as a host than a subject, someone who facilitates conversations and experiences rather than taking center stage. But nearly everything he's done contradicts that. From stepping into the wrestling ring solo to launching a solo podcast to producing a solo-branded version of Try Guys-style content, the spotlight hasn't shifted at all, it's simply intensified. Critics argue that this isn't a man stepping back, it's a man rebranding himself as the star of a new narrative, one he alone controls. And the timing of it all suggests a certain defiance, not humility. Rather than listening to the public's feedback or acknowledging the weight of his actions, Ned appears to be bulldozing forward under the assumption that content is king, and reinvention is just a camera angle away. The problem, say commentators, is that empathy isn't earned through production. It's earned through presence, through silence, through work that doesn't require applause. By rushing back into the limelight with so much polish and so little pause, Ned may have misunderstood the very human qualities that made audiences connect with him in the first place. This isn't about whether he's talented or capable, it's about whether he's trustworthy. And right now, the consensus seems to be that no matter how many guests he features or challenges he attempts, people aren't convinced that Ned's doing this for the right reasons. They see a man trying to rebuild his reputation not through reflection, but through reinvention. And that difference between healing and rebranding might be the very thing holding him back. As the dust settles around Ned Fulmer's return to the public eye, one conclusion becomes inescapable. This isn't just a comeback, it's a cautionary tale. What began as a scandal over personal betrayal has now transformed into a full-blown identity crisis, broadcast in 4K by reviving the very format that once defined his career, without the team that made it thrive. Ned has unintentionally confirmed what many suspected all along: that lightning rarely strikes twice, especially when the original storm was of your own making. His attempts to reframe himself as a curious, empathetic host have been undermined at every turn by a public that sees through the production and remembers the person. And while some might argue that everyone deserves a second chance, that chance is often earned quietly, not announced with trailers and merchandise. In the end, the tragedy of Ned Fulmer's comeback isn't just that it failed to land, it's that it revealed a deeper truth about influence, ego, and the illusion of control in digital celebrity. You can copy the content, fund the format, and even mimic the language, but you can't replicate trust. That once broken is rarely restored by the very man who broke it. And so Ned's rebranding as a solo creator feels less like a rebirth and more like a stubborn refusal to accept the end of an era. A man once known for loving his wife now finds himself begging an audience to love him again, even if they no longer remember why they did in the first place. The try guy may be gone, but the trying hasn't stopped. And perhaps in the most ironic twist of all, that's the only part of his story that still rings true.